Hello everyone, this is Jerry Alt, back with another Photoshop tutorial for you. What we're going to do today is talk about how to take a rather mundane photo and turn it into something that looks closer to fine art. Now, I'm not claiming to be an artist, I certainly am not. I do have a lot of experience using Photoshop, but even I find new things after plenty of years of doing the normal editing and cropping and whatnot that can enhance my images. So what I've pulled up here for you is an image I took in Kenya a couple of years ago. You can see that this was shot with a telephoto lens because we've got nice separation of the giraffe from the background. But there's a lot of distraction in this shot. This is not unlike a shot you might be able to get at your local zoo, if and when we're able to go outdoors again, that is. But there's some distractions. You've got this bush here to the left that the giraffe was probably munching on. And it's not the best quality photo. I shot this pretty wide open. I was trying to shoot a little bit faster, but had a wide aperture. I mean, I can see here in the detail by the giraffe's eye that there's actually a fly coming in there. There's a bird sitting on its back. You may not have noticed that. These are little details that don't really have a lot to do with this, but as long as you've got a reasonably good photo, pretty well in focus, then what we're going to be able to do is pull out even more details here. So I liked this one because it's pretty simple. I've done this technique on much more complex subjects, and I would tell you that in the spectrum of retouching your images artistically, you could just retouch them, change saturation levels, adjust your black and whites, etc., and say that's a good photo, I'm done with it. On the other end, you've all seen complex composites, elephants carrying a balloon in its trunk with the sky full of rainbows, that kind of thing. This isn't that far. This is just taking a reasonably good photo and trying to add a little oomph to it. So let's proceed. I've pulled this image into Photoshop, and the first thing I want to do with this, even though I probably did some basic adjustments, might have cropped it a little bit in Lightroom, but essentially this is the shot out of camera. I'm going to go up to the filter menu with this layer active, and I'm going to go down to camera raw filter. Now this is a feature that I haven't taken as much advantage of in the past because I tend to go from Lightroom to Photoshop and back. Some of you may be using Adobe's Bridge and then going into the camera raw filter automatically when you double click on an image in Bridge to open it in Photoshop. There is an intermediate step that takes you right here. But however you get to the raw filter, there's a few things that we can do with this. Now, what I'm going to do is end up blending out this busy background so that we can focus on the giraffe. So what I want to do is bring up the clarity a little bit. I just want to snap the details of that giraffe out a little bit. Because we're going to blend it, I want to pull up the white levels a little bit. The skin of a giraffe is not actually white. It's a lighter tan color, and then the darker, more orangey brown. So we're going to bring this up a little bit. Then I'm going to take the blacks down just a tiny bit, trying to make sure that I don't have any blown out areas. That's a good thing about this photo, one of the reasons I picked it. You can't control the light when you're in Africa. You find the animals where you find them. It's not like in a zoo where they may stand in one spot. They're moving around, you're moving around. So you're kind of fortuitous whenever you can get a halfway decent shot. So I think that this gives us some good detail to start with. We're going to come back here toward the end. So I'm going to click OK. That's going to save these changes back to our layer. The next thing I want to do, and I always do this when I'm editing so that if I make a mistake I can go back easier, I'm going to create a duplicate layer here. And the best way to do this is to hit the Command J or Control J on your keyboard. A couple of other ways to make a duplicate. That's the shortcut I think you should remember because it's pretty easy. So now I've got a second layer. It's not that we're going to ignore the other one, it's just there as a safety valve. So we're going to work on this layer in front of us, and we're going to select out the giraffe. But the first thing is to find a background that we want to put in here. So what I did is I already selected a texture file and just open it here to save some time. But I've got this texture file here. Now, how would you get to that file? If you go to your file, open, go down to place embedded, go out and search for the file you want. This happens to be a folder that I got from Scott Detweiler's website. He makes some really nice filters, or not filters, but nice textured background layers that are easy to use. So I grabbed this one. It's called Rashek. I have no idea why. And I want to bring it in. Now this is square, but that's okay. When you've got the texture layer on top, hit the Command T to select that image and then adjust it to cover your subject. If you just pull on the corners, I'm working on a Mac, it's going to adjust itself proportionally, but it's a texture. Don't worry about that. If it is a little stretched out, it just adds to the abstraction that we're trying to achieve. But if you hold the Shift key down, then you can grab edges and just pull them up. So you see here, we're actually stretching this image a little bit. Okay, then double click, or you can click up here on this check mark when you're done to say, okay, I want to accept that. Now, the one thing I do when I get textures like this that kind of flow from darker to lighter and from highlights to shadow is I want to click this on and off and make sure that I've got that giraffe that I want to highlight someplace where there are highlights in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this again, and I'm just going to stretch down on this a little bit more. Let me adjust the size here on the screen. A little bit more so that I get a little more of that hotspot area right there where the giraffe's head's going to be. All right, so now we're going to turn this off for a moment. We're going to go back to our layer with the giraffe, and we need to extract that image and leave all of this garbage behind it out of the picture. If you're on a newer version of Photoshop, I'd suggest that you try the shortcut, see if the program will do a good selection. It typically does. It gets better with every version. But I've gone up here to my quick select tool. Then once you click on that, if you're on something else, then you get different stuff at the top. When you click on quick select, up at the top of your window, you'll see a select subject and a select and mask. Click select subject, and then this will do typically a reasonable job of selecting out your subject. And I can see that the edges are really well cut out. It's missed some of this in the middle because it really wasn't sure whether that was part of it or not. So I'm just going to continue to use my quick select tool and just select out those spots inside so that I have a nice clean selection of everything here. Now there's a little bit of fur on the edge. We could go into the select and mask, and we could take the extra step of trying to bring some of that back. But because of the way we're going to apply this texture, it's not really going to matter. So let me make this a little bit smaller so you can see what I'm doing. All right, with this still selected, I'm going to go back and select my texture, which is on top, and you can see that the outline of the selection is still showing there. Make sure you're on the texture layer, so click on it once, and then we're going to mask this because I want to see the selection. I don't want to see the rest of the background. Quick way to do this is hold down your Option key and click on Mask. The reason for that is if I just clicked on the mask, it would mask over the giraffe because that's what I selected, and I would just have a spot there. It wouldn't be anything showing. All right, so with this now selected, you know, it's pretty clean. I might have gone back. I might have done a little bit of the select and mask and got a little more of the detail here in the hair. Bring it in a little bit so you can see there's a tiny bit of the background still showing through here, but it's fine. Again, we're not going to be working that precisely on this particular giraffe. All right, so with your cursor on the mask, not on the image itself, I want you to go to your brush selection. I've remapped some of my keys, but if you hit the B key, it'll take you to this whole group of brushes, the brush tool, pencil tool, and a mixer brush. We're only going to use the standard brush tool. Then I want to go up to the brush properties on the top left, click on that, make sure your hardness is all the way down to 0 and that you're using a soft round brush. At this point, I want to have a much bigger brush because I'm just going to use the edges of that brush. So I'm using my right bracket keys. Those are the ones to the right of the P on your, typically on your keyboard. You have a left bracket and a right bracket. Left bracket makes it small, right bracket makes it big. I'm going to pick a nice big brush, and then I'm going to go here and make sure that I'm using white, because again, the white is what I eliminated and replaced with the underlying texture. So I want to be on white on the mask because I want to reveal some of that texture back in on the giraffe. Okay, so let's see where we are. I've got 20%, let's go maybe 30% or so on that. And now I'm just going to forget that little spot in the middle. That's because I'm recording and it's showing you a spot. But what I'm actually doing is using the edge of the brush, just this little edge. Imagine this edge of my image is the giraffe itself. I'm just bringing the edges in like this because I want to use the feathered edge. It's a very soft brush. It fades away. Here, I'll kind of show you what this would be doing. I'm going to go onto the actual background layer for just a second. I'm going to select a black color, and I'm just going to click on it one time. Well, it's not going to let me do that. It's going to say I have to rasterize this, so probably not the best example for you. Let me go back to a different layer just for a second here. Just want to show you what we're doing. Let's go to that underlying layer. I'm going to turn this off for a second. If I had that brush set at black and I click, go to 100% just so you can see it. And I click. There. I've got a black spot, but you can see how it fades out to almost nothing at the edges. If I had this brush completely hard and I clicked, I'd get a round ball. Well, I don't want that, and I don't want those kind of hard edges showing up on our subject. So let me back up 2 steps here, get rid of that, go back where we were. So the point is, I want to go back and make this brush soft again. Come back to my image, and I'm just using the edge at about 30, oops, I'm at 100%. See, I went back to show you something, so I got to back up a couple of steps. There we go. I want to change this opacity from 100 down to a smaller number. Shortcut here for opacity, just hit the number. 2 will give you 20, oops, do it quickly. 2 gives you 20%. You can, without clicking in it, that's the problem. Don't click in it, just anywhere you're working on the image, just push the 4 goes to 40%. I'm doing this again. I'm trying to record this and do it at the same time. Okay. In the opacity, there we go. Working on opacity. If I hit 3, it goes to 30%. 5, it goes to 50%. It just saves you moving your mouse back and forth. But I want kind of a low flow, so I want this to be about 30%. And then I want to go and just work over these edges. You see how my cursor's actually well off of the subject. And I'm just going to go around. I'm clicking. You can see with that little dot that I'm not so much running my brush down, but I'm just clicking. And what I'm trying to do is soften the edges. One of the keys to blending any subject into a background is to eliminate that real sharp edge that makes it look like it was cut and paste. All right, so you see we've kind of overdone it here. We've really kind of blended this giraffe in so you don't see a lot of the detail. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make the brush smaller. Remember the bracket keys, bigger and smaller. I'm going to hit the X key that's going to switch my colors from the white to the black. X will just switch it back and forth. black is going to reveal parts of that, hide parts of that mask that I was just painting in. And now I'm going to come back inside, because I really only want the edges to be affected. So now I'm getting some of that detail back. I'm still at 30% flow. You could be at 25 or 30, whatever your taste is. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just a question of what you want. I will tell you that I think it's important to get the eyes back as much as possible. And it's a little more difficult on an animal like this. Typically, if I zoom in on this, because the eyes are offset to the side, you see how I'm picking up some of this background and getting rid of that, and I don't want that. So I'm going to make my brush smaller. I'm going to change my color back to white, and I'm going to paint back in what I was losing here. So don't worry about the lashes. It's the eyes I want to be sharp. That'll get us pretty good. And then do the same thing over here. And just dab at it. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to black. Come in on just the eyeballs and just kind of bring those. I can increase that. I just hit the number 5, took my opacity to 50%, and just click in on the eyes. With an animal, if I can get their eyes right, and then I want to make sure I got their nose. Especially if you shoot something like a deer or an elk or a bull, and they've got, that kind of leathery looking nose, you want some detail back in that. We do want to preserve some of the detail here in the face, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm just going to do the inside of the ears, leave the little fringing at the side, but bring back a little bit of that detail on the inside. Kind of makes it a little more realistic. If you want to go whole hog and keep dabbing with the white on this, eventually what's going to happen is you're going to get back to just the background. You're going to erase, in effect, the entire animal that you're trying to get. So I'm going to make this even smaller. I'm going to go to my white. I'm going to come in right around that eye. I want to avoid anything that looks like it was patched together. Then we're going to run around it. You can see here that on the hair, there's a little bit of that white or the light that was coming through it in the original photo. I'm just going to touch those spots very lightly, and that's going to blend them, so you almost are losing the hair into the background. Nothing wrong with that. Now, I mentioned the little bird here, so let's hit the X key and come back to black, and let's bring a little bit of that bird back into the picture. There we go. Just fix the tiny bit of white. So you have to take your time doing this. Once you've practiced it a few times, I'm able to kick out some of these images in 10 or 15 minutes. This is not hours, but as you notice, I haven't done anything artistic at this point. But what we've managed to do is get a nice soft edge, a nice transition from the animal into the background. All right, I'm going to pull out so we can take a look at that. That's not really bad at all. If you don't like that color, if you want to adjust the color, you can add an adjustment layer. Go down to the bottom, click what looks like a half moon. Go to the Hue and Saturation adjustment layer. But this is important. I got a bunch of layers down here. I want to click this bottom left button in that box so that it clips that layer to the one underneath it. And because of the masking, what it's really going to do is just affect your background and not affect the zebra. So as you see the zebra, this is totally weird, but it shows you the point. You can see where the little bit of blue is bleeding into the edges of the neck and around the head, and that's because we've just blended that background into the foreground. So if you slide the hue and saturation, you can go to extremes, but I was trying to get something natural. I don't want it to be exactly what the animal was because I want it to stand out a little bit more. So that's not bad. Somewhere in there. I can decrease the saturation or bring it up really crazy, depends on your mood. I'm going to leave it a little bit above half because I want that background to pop a tiny bit. Then you can change the brightness of the background, and again, typically wherever it starts is going to work. unless you've got really dark spots in it. Okay, so we're going to accept that and say that that's pretty good. Now what I want to do is take all of my visible layers, and I had one at the bottom which was the finished one I did before. I'm going to turn that off just so I don't have to mess with it. There's a shortcut, and I don't remember all the keys on the PC offhand, but it's Command Option Shift and the letter E on the Mac, so it's probably Control Option Shift on the PC. And what that does is it takes all of those underlying layers you just had and consolidates them and creates basically a stamp. Now I have a single, I can turn everything else off, and I've still got that image. What I've basically done is created a flattened image on top of the layers, but I didn't get rid of the layers. Now you can certainly keep flattening as you go, but you know, if you get down to the last touch of this and go, oh, I want to fix around the eye, and you flattened everything, you're not going to be able to do that. So at this point, I'm going to take that layer that we just created, and there's a command here, which I can't get to because I've already flattened it, that does the same thing. You can find it in the menu, but that shortcut will do it for you. Just have to hold your fingers in the right position. Command Option Shift E on the Mac again. But what we're going to do is go back in as a final step, or next to final, depending on what you want to do. And I go back to the camera raw filter. Now what I'm going to do, depending on what I want to do with this image, is I can increase the clarity a lot more. That's going to have the effect of, you know, adding to the textures that are behind it. It's also, as you can see, making that giraffe pop a little more on the background. I can bring a little bit of texture from here into it. If I pull it all the way to the left, it gets kind of watercolory and soft, but I want to see the fur on the animal, so I might increase that a little bit. And then here's the secret. You don't know where this is unless you've worked with the camera raw filter, and you've probably, like me, skipped it forever and ever. But if you come up at the top of these sliders, under Profile, see, if you click on it, you say, oh, color, monochrome, oh, whatever. There's a little box here to the right. You can see it right here. If you click on that, here's where the magic comes from. You've got profiles that Adobe builds for you based on your image. There's an artistic, a black and white, a modern, and then a vintage look. And within each of these, you've got selections. So what it's done is it goes in here. Let me make this smaller so you can see the whole thing. There we go. You know, if we go to the first one, it's promoting some of the magentas. Here it's promoting some of the orange channel. We get something that's pretty cool. I kind of like that. Go down the bottom, that's more yellows, and you've lost some of the reds that are in there. And the same thing here. You just get different looks. I like this one. I think that looks pretty good. But we're not done. We've got other choices. Go down to the modern. Sometimes I find things in here. And the same kind of thing. A little more sepia tone, maybe. There's one that's fairly similar to the one I just picked. That's a more matted look. Anyway, play with it. Take a look at them. See what you like. I don't like that one. I think I'm going to go back and, you know, I'm still selected on the Artistic 5. You do have, and I've used this for zebra, for elephants and the like, you have a monochrome panel as well. There's some interesting things done with the monochrome. You know, if all you do in Lightroom is click the black and white button, you lose out on a whole lot of the nuance that you can get from shifting your gray points. But, you know, I hate to waste a nice colorful animal with black and white, so I'm not going to use that. I'm going to go here with the Artistic number 5. I kind of like that. Up at the top, I'm going to close this group. And then what I can do is come over to the individual colors and the saturation. You know, maybe you don't want it to be that bright. You can pull down the orange channel. See what I'm doing here? Making it more muted. That's basically what those artistic profiles were doing, is just adjusting some of these. So I might bring the reds down a little bit. Maybe the yellows down a little bit more. I kind of like the blaze orange behind him. It adds something for me to the image. And then these blues and purples, there are no blues in this channel, so you can take it back and forth. It's not going to do anything. But you can see that we're in a yellow and an orange palette here, so we can play with the red, orange, and yellow sliders to kind of, just customize this and get it where you want it. So for our purposes and for this demonstration, that's fine. And then I'll click OK, and there we go. I've got an image that we can use. It pops, it's got all the photographic detail, but it also still looks a little bit like you've painted it. So imagine taking a portrait of somebody's dog and being able to do this to it and really make it look special. So it wasn't just shot in the yard on the grass, it wasn't shot in your studio on a gray background. You can really help yourself out by adding to these layers. So that's what I've got for you today. I might crop that down a little bit, but I can crop it when I go back. So if I close this, it's going to take me back to Lightroom, and then I can crop that down a little bit. I can make an 8:10 format. I could do square, or if you want, you can just do it right here. You can grab your crop tool and play with it to your heart's content. Get the image you want. Double click on it, and there we go. And now I've got an image ready to go. Save that out, send it to your printer. If you have any questions, feel free to add them at the bottom of this video, and I'll get notified and I'll answer them back as best I can. If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel. That way you'll be notified of future tutorials. I'm going to throw a couple of things at you real quick and then let you go. The photo I did myself. I told you this particular texture came from Scott Detweiler, D-E-T-W-E-I-L-E-R. Scott's got his own YouTube channel, and he does a lot of more in-depth. He's an artist, unlike me. Some more in-depth stuff. You might want to check out his channel. And this technique I got from watching a tutorial from Matt Kozlowski. If you've ever used On1, or if you were an Adobe Lightroom user for a number of years, Matt used to work for Scott Kelby's organization. Then he went to On1 Software. He's got his own website and his own channel. That's MattK, MattK.com. You might want to check him out. This particular tutorial that led me into this path of discovery was one that he was offering, and probably still is at the time I'm making this video, for 50% off for a period of time, just because photographers aren't really busy, because nobody can go anyplace. Certainly check it out. He's got a free intro tutorial. I love his style of teaching. He's very laid back and easy. He also creates a lot of loots for Lightroom, for lighting scenarios, and has a lot of Lightroom as well as Photoshop tutorials. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you very much for watching.